The opening scene is in Los Angeles, 2019. We see Clarissa, a professor who leads her professor friend, Paul, and his wife into the art gallery. Clarissa introduces them to some art inside. As people flood the place checking out the different paintings hung on the wall, they stumble upon Jonathan, who welcomes Paul and gives some accolades to Clarissa for assisting him in putting up the art gallery event. He soon bid them a wonderful time as they continued checking out the many paintings displayed on the wall. Jonathan calls Clarissa back, and he appreciates her for coming into his depressed life and turning it around. The duo soon start flirting, and Jonathan leads them into a secluded room to quickly make out. A few moments later, he comes back out to find his wife in the gallery. He isn't expecting her to make it to the event, so he's a bit surprised. Jonathan leads his wife away to divert her attention from Clarissa, who will be coming out soon. Clarissa spots Jonathan, his wife, and a few others having a conversation. She gets uncomfortable, but controls herself, and in no time she walks away so as not to draw unnecessary attention to herself. It's the year of COVID-19 already, and the news of its spread is everywhere. People are forced to stay indoors to prevent further spread of the virus, which is ending people en masse. On Monday, Jonathan gives Clarissa a surprise call, and she's excited to talk to him. He reveals that his wife stepped out to get groceries, so he told her he would be on a business call for the next hour. Clarissa feels excited seeing his face, even though it's on a video call. She informs him that she feels important whenever he lies to his wife for her. However, she promises to cut off his balls if he lies to her. Jonathan misses her greatly. He's faced with putting up with his wife, who feels like a practical stranger to him. He urges her not to feel jealous of his wife because they haven't even had sex in like 3 years. They admit that they've missed getting intimate with each other, and since they are both horny, they decide to do it via the video call. His words turn Clarissa on, and she's moaning quite loudly over the phone. Jonathan's wife opens the door, interrupting them. He lies that he's speaking to Erica at the gallery, and they are discussing the paintings. On the other side of the call, Clarissa feels irritated. She drops her tab and gets off the bed. Meanwhile, across town, Paul and Rita enjoy each other's company. Rita serves her husband some cookies, and he feels so excited that he leaves his piano to taste the deliciousness. Clarissa spends the rest of her day in the house, while Jonathan feels stuck with his wife, who enters the room and climbs the bed. He bows his head down in frustration, not knowing what to do. Clarissa tries to reach out to him severally, but he isn't taking up her calls. She decides to call her friend, and thankfully he picks up. She opens up about how she feels about Jonathan being married while she's alone and how it makes her feel. She believes him when he tells her that he's not in love with his wife. She remembers when she met Jonathan newly. He told her that he was in an open relationship, but it turns out that he opened it without telling his wife. Her friend advises her to find a better situation, one that's filled with trust, mutual respect, love, loyalty, and constant physical contact. Seems as though Clarissa isn't listening to him. So she informs Paul that she thinks Jonathan would have left his wife if not for the fact that they have 2 kids, and he can't divorce her because she has chronic asthma. She confesses to feeling guilty, but then she feels ferociously jealous at the moment. Paul tries his best to advise her as much as he can before ending their conversation, asking her to stay safe and sane. On Tuesday, Clarissa holds her class online with her students via her laptop. At the end of the class, she gives them an assignment and bids them until their next online class. She gets back to the living room feeling frustrated. She hasn't received any call from Jonathan, and she is alone and bored of being all by herself. She sends a text to him requesting he call her as she can't take it anymore. He replies to her almost immediately, apologizing because he can't make calls at the moment as his wife is around. His wife comes around to give him a plate of cookies, and he quickly hides his phone before she notices. He takes a bite and shouts to his wife, informing her to stop bringing him cookies, as he's trying to lose weight, not gain them. He drops the plate down and continues fixing some of his work on the wall. At Paul's home, Rita comes to inform him that she'll be watching some MMA women, but her husband suggests she watch something else. She questions why he's always wanting to improve her. She doesn't understand why she has to watch some history instead. Paul apologizes and asks her to watch whatever she wants as he loves her regardless. He kisses her and assures her that he loves her exactly the way she is. She smiles, feeling a bit better with his response. Rita asks to know how the chapter he's working on is coming along. He shares a quote from Plato, which he includes in his writing, but Rita thinks it's poetic. He laughs over it lightly, informing her that it's just a quote from a philosopher. Over at Jonathan's house, he's shouting while making a call. His wife walks in to find him threatening the person at the other end if anything should go wrong with his gallery. Out of concern, she asks to know what's going on, but he dismisses her questioning, and he doesn't tell her everything. She quietly walks away, informing him that she will be stepping out to get something for their twins. Jonathan reminds her to wear her mask and gloves because she's at a high risk of catching the virus. He turns back to his computer, apologizing to the person on the other side of the call. After his call, he steps out of the house to call Paul. He wants to know if Paul is interested in the bird painting at his gallery, the one he seems to have spent more time looking at. Paul asks him to hold on to it for a few more days. Rita loves it, but he's uncertain if they will be buying it or not. Clarissa is at home feeding on some snacks when she sees her neighbor passing by. They wave at each other through the see-through glass separating them. She notices his bum is out on display as he's wearing what looks like pants. She turns around to avoid ideas running through her head, especially as she's lonely. The night comes and Clarissa gets to spend the night alone while Jonathan is on the bed with his wife. They face the other side of the bed as though they are just roommates. In their bedroom, before going to bed, Paul uses his fingers to run through his wife's face as he admires her while she's soundly asleep. The next day, Clarissa plants some vegetables while on a call with a friend. She gets up to pick up something and misses a step. She picks herself up from the floor and limps as she makes her way inside. At Paul's home, he's on the phone pissed with the caller for always calling to give moderations on how the book is supposed to be. He blatantly tells the caller to write the book himself if he wants it written in a certain way. He hangs up and requests for Rita to come so he can admire her beauty. She walks over and sits on his lap. While he enjoys the warmth of her body, he receives a phone call from Dr. Camden at Heaven Meadows, who informs him of his mother's ill health. The doctor informs him that his mother is having a high fever, and she's having difficulty breathing. However, they can't allow him to see her as they've not ascertained the cause of her sickness, but they promise to keep him posted. After the call, Paul feels worried. He asks Rita if it's fine for his mother to come live with them. She thinks about it for a while. She isn't cool with his mother staying with them, but she tells him that it's fine for her to stay. She excuses herself for her walk. At Jonathan's house, he's on a Zoom call with James, who helps him with his business, and his other employees. James informs him that the paintings that are supposed to be on consignment are not having any sales at the moment because nobody is buying anything. He suggests they need to change something fast as the financials are not looking too good. Jonathan is worried, but he doesn't know what to do. He hopes that Paul purchases that painting. People are staying in their homes, and they've not sold any paintings recently. James informs him that they need to find a way to take care of the finances. Jonathan switches the call to those of his other workers who are questioning him about when they will get paid. He soon starts raising his voice and picks up his phone, which has been ringing. He talks to Clarissa on the phone for a few minutes, telling her about the immense pressure he's under. He blurts out that a job would help him right now, and he quickly puts himself together so he can go back to his Zoom call. Clarissa laughs at his response just before the call comes to an end. She is struggling with her foot, which she sprained when she hears a knock. She looks through the glass and finds her hot neighbor making gestures for a remedy to help with her injury. He signals her to check her phone. They send messages to each other, and he informs her that the fridge has stopped working again. Clarissa tells him that the new part is on its way, and she'll take some money off his rent. Minutes later, Jonathan calls to apologize for what happened earlier. She asks him to FaceTime her and shows him the injury on her leg. She can sense that he's stressed, and Jonathan opens up to her that he might be losing the gallery. He requests to drop by her place later and comfort her, even if he'll have to see her from a distance. His wife soon starts calling, and he requests to see her tits before hanging up. Clarissa refuses, informing him that a guy is right outside circulating, and it's creeping her out, so there's no way she's going to show her when he's watching from the glass. Jonathan ends the call to go answer his wife, who's still calling his name. Rita comes home to find her husband practicing golf. He welcomes her back and shares a quote from Einstein, which he thinks he can write something off. She admits that it's a great idea, and she soon gets on her way inside to go prepare something they will eat. Clarissa sits outside her house, waiting for Jonathan to show up, but he doesn't. Jonathan arrives from the gallery a while later. He brings back some paintings along with him. His wife prepares some pasta, so she asks him to come have some, but he refuses. He picks up Clarissa's call, but addresses her as Mr. Marlowe because of his wife's presence. He apologizes for not coming to see her because he got quite busy at the gallery. Clarissa feels offended because she's been sitting out waiting for him for 2 hours. and he couldn't even call to inform her that he will no longer be coming. She ends the call feeling disappointed. In the next scene, Paul and his wife are on the bed watching the news about the virus and measures taken to curtail it, even though it's still spreading like wildfire. Thursday comes and Clarissa is taking another class with her political science students online. In the course of her class, Jonathan calls her to have a word with her. She excuses herself and steps away. He reveals that he's down and he needs some encouragement. She informs him that she's in the middle of a class and she's still mad about what he did the previous day. She says a few words of encouragement and excuses herself to go back to her class. Jonathan later steps out of the house, taking their dog on a walk. He calls Paul to discuss the Berg painting. He informs him that he's willing to give him a pandemic discount, but Paul doesn't sound like he's willing to purchase the painting. He phones Clarissa and tells her that Paul isn't coming through on anything. He's worried that very soon he will be bankrupt and homeless, and he wishes he had a bigger car to live in. She reminds him that her 40th birthday is the next day. She suggests that it'll be a nice surprise if he showed up for her Zoom birthday party, and if he could just slip out for 5 minutes. He reveals that it'll be a dangerous thing to do considering that he will be at home with his wife. Her neighbor, who passes by to go receive a delivery, overhears her talking about her birthday. He walks over to her, suggesting that they celebrate her birthday. However, she prefers to lay low. Later that night, Clarissa and Jonathan are texting the things they can't say to each other because he's with his wife. She calls him to inform him that she thinks she can talk to one of her dad's rich friends to buy his painting. His wife interrupts their conversation by asking who he's texting at such an odd hour, and he lies, saying it's an artist named Barry Marlowe. At Paul's bedroom, he attempts to make out with his wife, but she pleads with him to let her rest. She requests he wait until tomorrow as she's extremely tired. He smiles and gently pulls away. In the next scene, the news reads out the number of COVID-19 cases in the United States as it keeps rising in both China and Italy as well. Jonathan feels agitated as he tries to see what he can work out. His wife comes to meet him where he's sitting with papers littering the table. Clarissa is having breakfast when her eyes fall on the note on the glass. Her neighbor passed a happy birthday design he made with paper and pen. Paul calls her to sing her a birthday song while playing his piano for her. When he's done wishing her a happy birthday, they start talking and Clarissa shares some crazy things one of her students thinks about the US. James calls Jonathan to advise him to close down the gallery permanently, as they are 2 months behind. He freaks out, yelling at the top of his voice at James. Sue steps in, requesting for James to be a little more tactful as they are talking about Jonathan's life's work. She tries to help Jonathan stay calm. Clarissa steps out to get the door, and to her surprise, she finds a package in front of her door. She brings it in and opens it up to find a note and an appliance in the box. She calls Jonathan, who picks up the call with a bit of tension in his voice. Clarissa starts singing a birthday song to herself. She thanks him for the present and asks when he will be coming. Jonathan apologizes and reveals that they can't do all the things they want anymore. He doesn't want to hurt his wife, who has had asthma her whole life. Clarissa feels disappointed and heartbroken. She disconnects the call, leaving him hanging on the line. At Paul's residence, he stumbles upon some quotes he thinks make sense. He calls on Rita, reading out each line for her to hear and share her thoughts, but there is no response from her. He receives another call informing him that his mother's condition is getting worse. After the call, he goes outside the house to meet his wife, and then informs her that his mother might not survive her condition. Over at Clarissa's place, the birthday girl is on FaceTime with her dad. She's all excited and shows him the flowers she got for her birthday. Her neighbor suddenly walks over to the glass part of the house and waves a piece of paper. She reads the words and chuckles lightly. She gives him a thumbs up for his words. Paul plays his piano weakly. Rita brings him some tea and encourages him to play more, as it always cheers him up. He discloses that he's worried about his mother. She taps his shoulder lightly, telling him not to worry too much. Later that evening, Clarissa applied her makeup in preparation for her Zoom birthday celebration. The call soon begins, and all her friends wish her a happy birthday. After the call, she sits on the couch, just looking outside, when her neighbor brings a chocolate cake and places it by her doorstep. She gets up and moves over to the door. She excitedly passes the cake to her. She invites him in, and the duo gets talking. At Jonathan's house, Sue passes the phone to him so his son Ricky can speak with his dad. After the call, he calls her back to compliment her, and he admits that she's a great mom. Clarissa and her tenant seem to be bonding well. They talk about themselves, their work, and the things they enjoy doing. They clink their glasses together as they cheer for the birthday girl. Saturday comes and Paul receives a piece of great news about his mother's improvement. He thanks the doctor and requests to be kept in the loop about her condition. Immediately after the call, he informs his wife of the great news he just heard. Jonathan calls Clarissa to apologize for not meeting up with her birthday schedule. He confesses that he misses her and wishes they could get intimate right away. She thinks his idea of an apology sucks and informs him that she's not in the mood and she's not his sex toy. The noise in the background where Jonathan is calling from is quite much, so she suggests he deal with his dog, which is barking, and then they can just talk later. He promises to call her back. While Paul is playing the piano, Rita comes informing him that she almost forgot about her run. She puts on her shoes and takes her leave. He sees that something drops on the floor. He picks it up and calls out to her, but she's far ahead already. Jonathan visits his gallery, which is now almost empty. He sits on the floor feeling dejected. Sue calls him and encourages him to pick himself up and reinvent himself. She reminds him that he's loved by her and their children, so he needs to get up and rebuild himself instead of letting the situation of the pandemic push him down. Meanwhile, Clarissa and her tenant are getting closer by the day. They even engage in games and other fun activities together. In the middle of the night, Sue wakes up to go pee. Jonathan suggests to her that when this turbulent time is over, he'd like them to travel to a remote island in Polynesia. Paul and Clarissa converse over the phone about a few things. She notices that something isn't right with him, so she asks him to talk to her. He confesses that he doesn't know exactly how he feels, but he just wants to hear her voice for comfort. He dismisses her probing questions and bids her good night. The following day turns out to be Sunday, and Jonathan takes down all the art in his house. Sue comes to encourage him, assuring him that there will be other art galleries and many more arts to come. Clarissa wakes and gets on her yoga mat, practicing her yoga exercises and meditation. Just when Jonathan has lost every iota of hope, he receives a call from Paul. He reveals that he wants to purchase the bird painting as a surprise for Rita. He feels there has been a bit of a sad atmosphere around his house, so he feels the painting might help cheer the atmosphere up a little. They reach an agreement and Jonathan promises to deliver it the following day. He feels super excited that he didn't even know when he tells Paul that he loves him. After the call, Rita comes to tell her husband that she will be leaving for her morning run. Some minutes later, Paul packs the trash out to dispose of them in a waste bin. He hears someone laughing, so he decides to check what's going on. He looks across to where the sound of laughter is coming from, and his mood instantly changes. Sadness engulfs him. Jonathan feels very hopeful. He drives by the gallery to grab the painting and then heads to Paul's house. Moments later, Paul steps towards his gate to pick up the delivery. He thanks Jonathan for delivering it early. Jonathan gets back home and drops a note and a flower on his wife's pillow. He moves over to sit at his side of the bed. Clarissa's phone notifies her of a call. She wonders why Jonathan has to make it a Zoom call. He informs her that Paul bought the painting and saved his ass. He admits that it's been 7 weeks since they were last together. She isn't pleased with him, and she's very clear about it. However, as he sees his wife approaching their bedroom, he quickly drops his phone on the bed. After the call, Clarissa turns her attention back to her work, and she is astonished to hear a sound from the phone. She realizes that Jonathan didn't end the call. She hears the conversation between him and his wife and her soft moans. She drops the phone, unable to hold back her tears as she runs to the restroom to wash her face. Later that night, she puts a call across to Paul and reveals that she just heard Jonathan screwing his wife. Paul thinks he can comfort her by telling her that he caught Rita and Harry the neighbor kissing. They lack words to even encourage each other. Clarissa starts apologizing to Paul and assures him that they won't get stuck in their unlucky love story. She informs him that she will be moving on and promises to be there for him whenever he needs someone to talk to. Paul confronts Rita as calmly as possible, and she expresses how critical and controlling he has been to her. She blames him for betraying her with his intellect and tries to make him understand that it is his fault. Clarissa decides to let go of herself. She dresses up nicely and steps out to spend some time with her tenant. She excuses herself to call Jonathan, who is watching a program on the TV with his wife. He addresses her as Mr. Marlowe and makes their discussion sound like it's about the business. Clarissa tells him of all she heard when he left the call. She expresses her disappointment as he paints a different picture of herself when they meet. He informs that he has refocused, and he realizes that he can no longer meet her expectations and standards. The call ends with Clarissa almost on the verge of tearing up. After the call, she goes back to meet her tenant, who tells her that he thinks she is cool. She smiles and admits that she thinks the same of him. He gets up and takes her hand for a dance. That night, Sue and Jonathan are lying on their bed. She smiles to herself after the satisfaction she had earlier. She stretches her hand out to Jonathan with a smile on her face. Meanwhile, at Paul's home, he and his wife make out after the disagreement between them. Sometime in October 2023, still in Los Angeles, Jonathan's gallery resuscitates, and he invites friends and clients alike to come for the reopening. His relationship with his wife has improved, and both of them welcome Paul and his wife as well as other guests at the event. Clarissa shows up as well with her new man. Her relationship with Jonathan isn't as it used to be, but they are cool with each other. Their stories and friendship come alive again with the end of the lockdown in Los Angeles in May and June 2020.